It's hard to describe verbally exactly how the scene looks, but it was done really well. It was very funny.
It was almost like in Laugh-In when people would pop up and say things, but he did two different people's part of it, right? Like he was on two different sides of the door.
Yeah. Laugh-In's a good analogy there because that's a show that happened at that time.
Man, that is a show that happened. That's great analysis, Gordo. Thank you so much for chiming in with that.
You know what?
Jesus.
You tried, bud. You tried.
I was on your side. You were coming back at me with the Laugh-In thing. I thought we were going to have a conversation, and you just puttered.
I'm so tired.
So
You know what?
quickly.
Welcome back, everyone, to S1E1, a show where each week we pick a different sitcom, watch just the first televised episode, and forgetting anything we might know about the future run of that show, rate it and decide if it's a show we want to greenlight or cancel. This week we're going to be talking about Taxi. Taxi won 114 episodes over 5 seasons on ABC, with the final season on NBC. Today we're talking about episode 1, which is called Like Father, Like Daughter, originally airing September 12th, 1978. So to get things started, I'm Jay Gags. With me, as always, the boys, all the boys, Nick, Ferg, Joe, and Gordo. What's going on, guys?
Hey,
Thank you very much.
Hello.
happy extravaganza, boys.
Yes. Extravaganza.
I'm very, very excited about this. Guys, we are in the midst, the first week of our 4-week extravaganza. This was something that I wanted to do. I was really giddy when I first proposed this. I was very happy everyone was on board. But so for those of you guys listening, we're doing a whole month of Tony Danza, 4 Tony Danza shows back to back to back to back. The only one that's kind of missing is Baby Talk. Baby Talk we've already covered it, so you can go back and listen to that one.
You know what's crazy, too, I thought about is, well, 2 things. I'm going to bring up 2 Tony Danza things really quick. One, it's kind of crazy how well everybody knows Tony Danza, but in the grand scheme, how little he's actually been in. You know what I mean? He's just been in such, like, popular things that, you know, he didn't need to do much.
I think he's done more than you realize.
No, I know he's got a large, like, you know, IMDb, like, resume, but, like, off the top, could you name, outside of the shows that we were doing for this, could you name 5 movies that he's been in?
The field goal kicker.
Yeah, that's one I can think of.
Angels in the Outfield.
2.
Yeah, Angels in the Outfield popped up really quickly for me, but I mean...
He's done a lot of serious stuff, though. I don't watch any of the, like, modern day, he does more serious roles, and I don't watch things like that.
Yeah, but my second thing is, did anybody catch a glimpse of Tony Danza's butt in this? Because I feel like they zoomed in on it at one point. He's just standing there in the tightest jeans I've ever seen on a human man. And how did you not see that? I should have cropped it because, you know what, Tony? Good butt, bud.
He deserves it. He's a boxer. He's in good shape.
Yeah.
We are doing all 4 Tony Danza shows in order of their release, so Taxi obviously being first. And I know this is like a common thing about Tony Danza that everyone knows how he often plays Tony in roles. All 4 shows that we're covering, his name is Tony.
Yep.
It's just easier. No confusion on set.
That's okay when you have a normal name like Tony.
Not so good when your name is Abalone.
Yes.
Well, anyways, a couple quick numbers to go over. IMDb 7.7 for the show. Rotten Tomato, the series 1 scores for that. 81% critics, 73% for the audience. A very popular show. Taxi was one of those shows that was like a Nickelodeon Nick at Night staple show.
It was like Taxi Tuesdays or whatever. They would play it till like 6 in the morning.
Yeah.
It's one of those shows, like, we've covered a few older shows lately, and, you know, this show came out in 1978, but I feel like I grew up watching it.
Same, yeah. This is one of those shows that was always on when we were growing up. It was in syndication forever. Same thing with Who's the Boss, too. When we were, it's not anymore, but as kids, Taxi and Who's the Boss, you had like a pretty good chance of catching an episode every day.
Yeah. It's so weird to look back and have nostalgia for a time that you watched another era.
But that said, so say we were watching this in 1995, right? Like, it wasn't that far back, especially if you go to the later seasons. Like, I think sometimes we don't realize how close things were to us as kids. Where now this would be a show that was like, if we were talking about kids watching it now, it'd be a show from like, 2010 or something.
Which, yeah, it's not that crazy in hindsight.
Which is like The Office.
Gordo, you'd be the only one. Did you watch Taxi as a kid?
I did, yeah. When it was on Nick at Night.
I was going to say, I figured Gordo is okay for any of the Nick at Night shows.
Usually Nick at Night is like the one pocket that we can usually trust that he's watched it.
That's all. I don't remember seeing it outside of Nick at Night. I don't think. Was it a TV Land show? It was
definitely on TV Land. When TV Land first started, and it was its mission statement of playing all the older shows only, it played a lot before they started playing like Raymond and making their own shows, and
Raymond
became a different thing.
Raymond. Also want to just bring up really quick, S1E1pod.com is where you can find all the links to our social media. So S1E1 pod on Instagram and X. The ones we're probably most active on, also on Facebook. But hit us up. We really like when you guys interact with us. So go ahead and give us a follow on those and like rate and review. All that fun stuff really helps us out. And we have merch now. So if you want to grab an S1E1 t-shirt, and they have other items you can get with those designs. It's those print to orders. So if you want like a S1E1 mug or something of that nature, that's also available.
Or a cool tote bag.
Or a tote bag.
I might get a tapestry and put it above my bed.
That seems weird. That seems like the only thing you could get that would be weird for you to have.
Especially if he gets the one that's just our logo, because then it's just cartoons of us hovering over his bed, which I don't want. Please don't get that.
Don't get the tapestry because it would be the one with our logo, and that doesn't have the background. So it's us just in front of a triangle with like all white behind us. It don't work because I tried to buy it.
You were going to get the tapestry?
This is the most any of us have said the word tapestry ever, by the way. I'd like to point that out.
Couple things I wanted to note about the show right off the bat. Here's something I did not notice when I watched the episode. And then after, when I was like punching up some notes, realized after the fact, no Christopher Lloyd. I didn't realize he wasn't like in the show right away.
I realized that at the very end. I was like, oh shit, I forgot he was in this.
And he was like one of my favorite characters back in the day.
He's just recurring in the first season and becomes full cast after.
Yeah, it was like, I didn't miss it in the moment because I honestly didn't notice. And then afterwards, I'm like, damn.
There's a lot of taxi things that I always think about. One of them, this is like the dumbest thing ever, but Christopher Lloyd later on in the show, as it goes on, they always go to a bar called Mario's. That's like a big set piece for the later seasons. Yeah. And then Christopher Lloyd comes into a bunch of money, so he quits being a cab driver and buys Mario's, and he names it Jim's Mario's.
Yeah.
So like my joke was always like, if I ever fall into money and I can open like a bar or a club, I'm just gonna call it Joe's Jim's Mario's. Like it's set. I have the logo. I've got everything. It's been in there for like 20 years. I just can't wait to do it.
See, I used to, when I lived in Medford, there was a place up the street, a sub shop called Tony's by George.
Yes, I remember that.
It was a great sub shop. Not sponsored or anything, but
it's closed now anyway, so don't worry.
The show also has a ton of tie-ins to Cheers.
Does it?
Yeah, a couple of the writers left to create Cheers. A lot of the characters from the show actors from the show have made appearances on Cheers and vice versa.
Is it the same universe? Like, are they just separate characters?
I think they just have the actors, but not the characters per se.
I'm thinking like Wing style, how they were in the same universe.
Well, they were in Nantucket. This is New York.
But also, there wasn't a ton of overlap either, though, because Cheers starts in 84, and this ends in 84, right?
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, right around there.
Yeah, so I think that they probably would have if there was another year in between, maybe.
Yeah, because like I said, that like the writers had moved on to like create the show, and the show is kind of on its like end of the run because like Taxi got canceled by ABC. NBC picked it up and like had like a campaign that was like, I don't remember the exact quote, but it was like, same show, better network, and they canned it 1 year later.
I mean, by that point, too, though, people were dropping off. That's like, do you see this sometimes with shows where it's like a main character becomes recurring by the last season? You know what I mean? You have to like sort of work around the people who only do a little bit. I appreciate them doing another season.
Jeff Conaway was already like fired from the show by then.
Yeah, he had gotten fired. Christopher Lloyd was still on it, I want to say, but I think they were writing him off a little bit. I think the Jim's Mario's thing was to make him recurring so that he was at the bar, not in the cab stand anymore. And Andy Kaufman was pretty much fired from the show at that point too.
He had like weird deals where he was it was like contractual for him to only be in X amount of episodes per season anyways. Like he didn't like being on sitcoms. We'll talk about him obviously more as he comes up.
We'll get there, yeah.
I'm a huge Andy Kaufman guy, but he was a weird duck, so.
I like Andy Kaufman, but I love Tony Clifton,
who was fired off of the show.
I was gonna say, I'm sure by the end too, Danny DeVito was probably way too big of a star, just like most of them, to be on TV.
They were all really like branching out as time went on.
By the 80s, though.
Can I ask? Because this is the only thing that I remember Judd Hirsch in.
Really, the only thing, huh?
Other than Superior Donuts.
Okay,
Like,
all right.
Well, Judd Hirsch was in another, created by other Taxi people, another great early 90s sitcom that we'll have to cover called Dear John that I've brought up a few different times. So he was the lead of another sitcom later.
Oh, is he a piece of shit deadbeat in that too?
No, he's a poor guy whose wife leaves him with a Dear John letter and he's trying to get his life back together.
Oh, so she's a piece of shit.
She's a piece of shit in that one, yeah.
You know what's kind of crazy too, thinking about it, like going back to Jeff Conaway, was Grease came out like a few months before the show premiered. So that must have been huge to help the show get like popular.
It's too bad that he wasn't in the good Grease though. Grease 2.
Will you stop it?
But like, think about like Grease blew up, right? So that movie comes out, instant mega hit. And now you have Kinnicky on the show like a few months later. Like the movie's probably still in theaters when this comes out.
It's a weird perspective that he's the big star, because we see that as other people, like as Danza, as Judd Hirsch, as Danny DeVito. But he's the guy.
He's probably the one who's the most famous walking into this. And mainly because that movie that just came out. If it had come out right before the movie, then he's probably like relatively not that huge himself either.
I will say though, Danny DeVito was in Cuckoo's Nest 2 years before this. That's a huge movie.
That's true.
And Christopher Lloyd is too, right?
Yeah, Christopher Lloyd is in
yeah, so you get two Cuckoo's Nester. Jack Nicholson did not want to make the Chief, didn't want to show up.
It'd be awesome at the end of the episode, he just throws the fucking water thing through the door.
He throws a cab through the window.
But there's plenty more we can bring up as we get along. I want to get into the episode itself. It starts off right with the intro. We've talked about this show way back. This is actually like one of the things I like about the fact that we're doing the extravaganza is Taxi and Who's the Boss have come up a million times each. So it was a great way to finally do both of those shows and just stop bringing them up. But we've brought up this many times. Taxi may be one of the most iconically boring intros in the history of television.
Thank you. Oh my God. I was about to snap at you. I thought you were going to say it was good. I compare this to MASH's. It's so boring and shitty as an intro. Like,
I don't know if you guys can tell here, but if you can see the hat I'm wearing, I wore this special for today. This is actually a Bob James Angela theme from Taxi hat that I bought a couple of years ago because I just thought that was so funny. And it's like a hat you wear when you like mow the lawn because it's like a light out, right? Like
this is an interesting hat.
It's a Taxi hat. We talk about sitcoms. This is not different. I was just waiting for Taxi. Fuck you, man.
I would say that, it's like I think the top three I can think of now for shows that we've covered, MASH, Taxi, and Wings. The three of them are all like standout, like boring intros.
I mean, MASH is the number one.
MASH is a tough one, yeah.
Well, MASH is a show that like, until I was an adult, I didn't even know it was a comedy because the intro was like, nope, this isn't for me. I would always click away immediately.
That was when you knew to go to bed.
Yeah.
Now, question about this theme. Is this the actual theme of Taxi that stays throughout the run of the episode?
Yeah,
because
this was always
I remember the doo-doo. Maybe I'm actually mixing up
Thinking
MASH
of MASH,
and Taxi.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Because
the hat Joe's wearing, that's the actual composer and name of the song. That's what it is.
Okay.
Is this a different version though?
Yeah.
I don't remember the saxophone solo in the middle.
I think it's an
this
elongated version that we're hearing in the first episode.
Longer.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't remember that at all.
Because it was a full like minute plus of intro.
Yeah, this is a longer one. What I didn't know though going to this was it's actually Tony Danza driving the cab.
Yeah, I read that too.
I thought you were gonna say it was him playing the sax.
I read it. He's like, one person really tried to get in the cab. They thought it was a real cab.
Also, this just hit me. The song is called Angela, Tony Danza.
Yeah.
Yes.
Who's the boss?
Oh my God, Angela!
That just hit me, yeah. Was Mona in the back seat of the cab? Oh, I hope so.
Mona's always in the back seat.
I cannot wait to talk about Mona. I might have to take myself off of that episode. I don't know if I can handle Mona talk.
I know, we can't be in that episode.
The thing about this intro, right, as much as we shit on it, and usually we're like, well, if they did this would have been more fitting and blah, blah, blah. I was trying to like rack my head. Maybe it's just because I've watched it so many times. I was like, what would be a better intro? Like, I can't picture something else in my head that made more sense.
Clips of people.
Yeah, I was gonna say at least have it less static, I guess, and introduce characters maybe. Or
I kind of like the juxtaposition of a sad song into a funny show.
No, but that new watchers are gonna shut that off. I don't know why I didn't.
Well, back when this came out, though, there was like 6 channels total, right? Like, this is like pre-proliferation of cable. So if you were like, this is on and 60 Minutes is on, like, you're gonna get through more
60
like
Minutes
openings.
has had an exciting intro.
But yeah, still, it's weird. I'm sure like there would have been better options. Like looking back, and, you know, it's funny because like I don't know. I'm trying to think of like it needs a theme. I think it maybe needed a theme song, but we didn't get one, and now I can't imagine it without it. So it is what it is. But
Taxi man.
Driving a cab, New York City. I'm walking here.
because you got to remember it's 78 too, so it'd be like more in that style, but it'd be something like rolling along. Like, you know.
Welcome, cab, to the same old cab that you drove around. Something like that.
What about I'm a cab man? Skippity, skippity, dippity, skippity.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly what music sounded like in the 70s.
Also, you know that Scatman says bebop bop badapo. You had to find a way to put skibbity in here. I hate you so fucking much for that.
I'm starting to think that Gordo has like a bingo card of like dumb shit he wants to say in an episode. And it's like, it's reached a point where he's like, I can't naturally do it anymore. So it's just like the end of, like in Super Troopers where they had to do X amount of meows and he was like, he needed one more.
No. That would justify his actions. I don't think he does have anything like that. He just does it.
No, I don't.
Our listeners could make a Goro drinking game.
I'd kill people. I don't want to be responsible for that.
Here's one real question, though, before we start off. When was the last time anybody in this room here, or our rooms respectively, were in a real deal taxi cab?
What's a real deal taxi cab?
Not an Uber, not a ride share. A taxi with a hack license.
To the airport.
And
Every time I go to the airport, I take them. I'm kind of in a unique position. I can see the cab company from my window right now. Locally, Ubers don't make sense, right? You have to wait for the Uber to get to you. Then you got to, take the ride or whatever. It costs too much. You can get around, our small town in a cab for like $4, $5, and I can walk to the cab right there. Like, it's like, so also, but sometimes you're reminded why Ubers took off. It's like I took a cab to the airport once. They only take cash, but only when going to the airport, and they could not break my cash. It was like $12, and all I had was a 20, and I was like, okay, here's a nice tip, I guess.
What
for
cab
why
driver
the
doesn't
fuck
have
don't
change
you have...
for a 20?
That's what I'm saying, and he was so matter of fact about it.
Yeah, ones that want an $8 tip.
And how do you not think to yourself, like, this is why you're fucking dying, right? Like, just...
Well, it's the app. The app is what made it convenient.
Yeah.
It's the lack of having to do the human contact. It's why we pay so much to use Uber Eats and Grubhub instead of just calling in now. And now it's gotten away that you really can't call anyone anymore. We pay all these fees.
I'll tell you exactly what it is. It's the tracking. Because I've taken cabs before, like to the train station when I lived in our small town and stuff. You'd call for a taxi and you'd be like, hey, I need to go to, the train station. And they'd be like, cool, we'll be there in 5 minutes. Well, 20 minutes pass and you go, hey, where's my taxi? And they go, oh, he'll be there in like 2 minutes. I'll give the guy a call. 10 minutes later, same thing. You can't track them without having to call the dispatch, who's now increasingly annoyed with you, who will, I feel, maybe push you off or whatever, depending.
And then the driver has the balls to lay on the horn when they get there because you're not outside. Like, how fucking dare you do that?
Exactly. So tracking is the real reason why all these things took off. It's no longer, whoever homeboy can fuck off and, fuck off.
I think for safety's sake, too, though, for tracking, right? Like, you get an Uber or whatever, you drop a pin, you can share it with somebody and be like, hey, I'm in an Uber. This is exactly where I am right now.
I've had people send me screenshots like, hey, I'm getting in an Uber. This is my driver and stuff. Like, I've had that happen multiple times.
Me too. My wife, every time my wife gets into a Lyft or an Uber, she shares it with me.
Yeah,
so
I think that's hugely helpful, right? Although there is the weird thing, though, when you call an Uber and then somebody shows up and you're like, that's not the guy in the picture.
I wouldn't get in. Honestly, at that point, just don't even get it and report it.
Me alone, I've done it. If it was my wife, obviously, I would say don't do that.
So to get back into the episode itself, after the intro, it's weird. We get that weird like POV shot driving in to the lot, which is the only like single camera shot of the episode. So it's kind of weird to start that way.
I liked it too.
We see the actual like garage, and it's like this nice pan shot. You see someone walking from left to right, and the camera kind of follows them, which is like a really nice way to show us like the whole set to like start off. I thought that was a clever first shot of the real episode.
They do it a lot in this episode too. It shows you how big of a set they built, because there are scenes here, like when they're on the phone or whatever, and the camera will pan to a different character and follow them all the way along to the other side of the room. And you're like, wow, they like really built a large set for this show.
It's nice because the majority of the episode, with a little exception we'll find later, and is all spent in this room. But because the room's so big, you can have different sections and sets like within the one big set. Even though there's no walls dividing them, it's like you can go from area to area, and it doesn't feel like you're just in one spot the whole time.
I think the construction too of when you meet Louis, he's elevated of everybody, also makes that set more unique, right? Because there's levels to everything. It's not one single straight static level of everything.
Even Laka comes from above too, different part of the set.
Yeah, they mentioned the third level at one point.
But Louis is the first one you hear, and it starts off with him like shouting off all those assignments to everybody. And you see him, he's in that elevated, like, kind of cage thing that Joe mentioned earlier. And that's Danny DeVito playing Louis De Palma. And again, iconic, has been in a million things. I don't know how much he did before this. I don't want to just blindly assume without looking, but, you know, breakout roles for a lot of people. But it's funny to see him so young, just to go back now. This show's so old now.
I know, he's so young, but also still just the same as now.
Well, we brought it up earlier. He's in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He looks like a baby in that. You got to go back and watch that movie.
Yeah, he was a big theater actor before that too. So I think that's maybe the biggest. You know, like Cuckoo's Nest happened, and then he starts working, and then through the '80s we get him in so much. Like Thermometer from the Train, which we bring up on this podcast pretty often.
His first appearance was in 1970, according to IMDb.
But we're a few years away from this show being like 50 years old. You know, it's crazy. But
that's crazy, yeah.
That is crazy.
It's crazy he's still doing TV now that he's on Always Sunny. We covered. He wasn't on the episode we covered, but
a lot of the cast, I mean, we have a couple people who have passed, but like Tony Danza, there's a bunch of people who are like still actively working and stuff, you know, all these years later.
Judd Hirsch is dead, right?
No.
We just did Superior Donuts not that long ago. He was
also in the Goldbergs till the very end too. He was one of the grandpas. He was great in it.
Oh, okay.
One thing I had read, I don't know if you guys had saw, when Danny DeVito auditioned for this role, he like walked in and like threw the script and was like, "Who wrote this shit?" And like that's what got him the job. They were
because
like,
he's a fucking hero.
He was so honest that they like applauded it, and he got the role.
Damn, Judd Hirsch is 89. I knew he was old. I didn't think he was pushing 90 though.
Well, again, this show is like 46 years at this point, and he wasn't like a spring chick there. He was definitely like the older of everyone there. So,
I mean, he talks about his daughter being born in 1963 in this episode, right? So
yeah,
he would have been, even if he was 18 in 1963, right?
After Louis gives all those assignments out, he starts talking to one of the cabbies, which is Tony Banta, played by Tony Danza.
See, okay, the Tony thing is fine, but like Tony Banta is too close. You know what I mean? If he's Toni Morrison, whatever.
Banta comes from one of the writers, I believe. So a couple names were taken from people. Banta was one of them, and then Elaine, I can't remember her last name right now. Yeah, DiNardo. So Nardo, right? Yeah, so they're those both directly came from an actual person.
My assumption was that it was like bantamweight, like a reference to boxing.
A good assumption.
Yeah.
And that's the first conversation we have. We find out that he's a boxer, and Louis talking to him, and he's like, "Hey, you get creamed in your fight last night?" He said, I love the line, "What's like having a cauliflower back?"
That is such a great fucking line. That you were knocked out on your back so often it develops cauliflower. That is a very funny joke.
I didn't get creamed. I lost on a decision. And then he walks off. He's like, "Referee decided I was bleeding too much." And the way he delivered that too, as he was walking off, like not right to the camera, I thought was really nice.
This is coming right after Rocky as well, right? So you have like another Italian, like down on his luck boxer character, which I feel like had to be part of it.
I didn't think of that connection. Yeah.
It's kind of weird because it's in this one giant set, and the way that characters kind of flow to get you to different spots. It very much acts like a play, you know what I mean? But it doesn't feel like a play. There's other times where we've done shows where I was like, this feels like a play, it doesn't come off that way, but it's like directed that way almost. Because as Tony's walking off, that's when we see Alex walking in, and he's walking in with a customer of his who's John. That's Judd Hirsch's character, obviously. It's like what was the situation? Basically, he didn't have change, so he had to take him back to the garage to get him change.
See, Nick, that's what should have happened with your cab.
Take me back.
Right back to your house. It's like, oh, come on, man. Did anybody notice, too, when Alex walks in, the entire cast goes, Alex, just like Norm on Cheers?
Yeah.
There's like that moment. Do you just give the big tip, or do you go, yeah, I'll go to the garage with you, I guess?
Well, no, he only had 50s. That would be a really big tip.
Yeah.
I did all the inflation math on this, too, for this whole thing. So after you explain the scene, we can go through the numbers. It's pretty interesting.
But this guy's like all about it. We don't know where he's from, but he's like on vacation to New York, essentially, and he's very excited to be in the city. So he's looking at this as like part of the New York experience.
He's like Alan Ruck in Speed when he's on the bus and he's just happy to be a tourist the whole time. It's like, I already saw the airport. Like, that's this character to a T.
And then when he gets the change, he's like giving him the money, and he's like trying to count out how much to give him for the tip. And he's like, it's like really drawn out. And he's like trying to do the math in his head. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm just like, it's a little difficult to figure out what 15% of 485 is when someone's looking at you. And then you just have like a dozen dudes, like everyone who works there, all shout out that it's 73 cents. Like they're all so used to doing this time in and time out that those numbers are just stuck in their head.
That also felt like a stage play direction as well.
Yeah.
It got a very big crowd pop too. Like everyone was like really tickled by all those like gruff dudes knowing the math like that.
I wrote down a few times, but there's a lot of like legit crowd pops in this episode where like they really get the cast, or they must have nailed some of these takes first time to like actually get the genuine response.
And then John needs to go use the payphone, so he heads over. And that's like another time where we kind of use the transition. He walks over to the payphone. Now we have Bobby walk up to Alex. Bobby's played by Jeff Conaway. We talked about him earlier. Kanicki.
Grease 2.
Does he reprise in Grease 2?
No, he does not.
You just wanted to bring up Grease 2, the significantly worse Grease movie.
It's like a tick. If someone mentions Grease, my brain just goes Grease 2. Like, I cannot say it.
Gesundheit. So they're talking, and the whole conversation, we find out that Bobby is an actor, and he's going out for this play. Is it Equus?
Equus.
I don't know this play. Is it a famous play? Because the problem is there's some jokes about the play, and I'm like, I don't know if this is funnier if I know the play.
It's a really famous play where we would probably know it more as people who aren't like big theater goers. This was the play that Daniel Radcliffe did a version of where he was nude. Remember, there's like a whole hubbub that he did like the play and there's nudity. That was Equus like 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
Okay.
Harry Potter's dick?
Yeah, so if you want to see Harry Potter's dick, you had to go see Equus.
I thought that was the sorcerer's bone.
You both went there and you both get points for it. Moving on.
Bravo, both of you.
But yeah, because the joke is like, there's kind of like this whole Tony's dumb thing, right? Where they're trying to like talk about the play, and then he jumps in. He's like, what's the part you going for? And he doesn't know anything about the play. And Bobby's like, you won't get it. Like, so I don't want to tell you about it. And then he tells him like, oh, I'm going for like, the part of the horse. And he goes, oh yeah, which end? And that gets like a pop, but I don't know enough about this play to know the horse's significance. Like, I know it's about a horse.
Jay, it's because he said, I'm going for the part of the horse. So he's saying like which part, as in which part of the horse.
Yeah, he was making a horse's ass joke that he was.
Got it. Because I was like, I don't know enough about the story of this play.
Do you know horse ass?
Now it makes sense. The part. It was the delicate wordplay there.
Do you guys like plays? Have anybody been to a play in a long time? I don't think I have in a very long time.
The only play that I like that's been done recently is Avenue Q.
I saw Book of Mormon. That was good.
I've wanted to see that for years. I haven't seen it yet, though.
There's a theater that does like touring in my town, and they're doing And Then There Were None, which is the Agatha Christie book. That looks kind of fun, but like I haven't gone to a theater play probably since we were in high school.
They've made all these like play adaptations for all these things that I have interest in all of a sudden. Like over the last, I feel like 10, 20 years, all of a sudden it's like whatever band, the musical, and like all these things come out. And
yeah, there's an Evil Dead musical now.
There was a Toxic Avengers one. There's all these things that like sound fun in theory. I just don't really attend that stuff, but would.
There's a Huey Lewis in the News musical that's out right now. And I'm a huge Huey Lewis in the News fan.
Me too.
Unabashed. And my wife looked for tickets for us. She was like, what if we could go, especially like right before we had the baby, like we could go out there, like have a New York day. And even tickets in like row Z were like $300 a piece. I was like, okay, well, we're never going to see that.
See, I just usually just watch whatever on YouTube.
I took my mom years ago for Mother's Day. We went to see Phantom of the Opera, which was cool because like she was a fan of it. Like to see, like I would have never gone to something like that otherwise. So I'm glad I took her because it was like an experience I probably wouldn't have had.
Don't look at me, I'm a monster.
You guys remember the cat's butthole?
What?
When they made a movie about cats and they had the buttholes?
No, they didn't have buttholes, and that was the controversy.
No, they did have buttholes, and it was off-putting, so they removed them digitally.
And then they had to reinsert them.
Yeah.
That was somebody's job. They had to go in and digitally remove fabric cat buttholes for... That's a resume builder right there.
They went through all that, and the movie still bombed. It's like, they probably spent a couple, like, million, probably more than that, to remove cat buttholes to lose more money.
Sometimes don't make a musical into a movie.
It was like that movie. Was it a Netflix movie? I forget which movie it was. But right when Chris D'Elia got canceled, they had to digitally change him to Tig Notaro in the whole movie.
Oh, the what is it? The one with Batista.
Yeah.
The Vegas zombie movie. What the hell is that
and like
called?
to digitally change him out of the movie to Tig Notaro the whole time, you got to imagine cost way more money than that movie made.
You know what's funny too is I saw that movie before I knew that, and I didn't notice. So they did a pretty good job.
I will say we got inundated when it came out because I think HBO maybe got the first rights to it, but like Steven Spielberg and a bunch of people like remade West Side Story a few years ago, and that just bombed too because don't remake something that's that classic. Like nobody cares.
The reason why that bombed was because they didn't put subtitles or dubbing on the Spanish stuff. They said, oh, it'll be like more realistic. So a lot of the movie you can't understand and you can't read what they're saying.
The no subtitles thing was a weird.
That's a weird
directorial
move.
choice.
Yeah. I understand being like if you're walking down the street in New York and people were speaking in Spanish and you didn't speak, like I get that like realism of it. But if you're watching a piece of art that you're trying to follow and understand for $17.50 that doesn't come with a popcorn bucket you can have sex with, then that just seems out of place.
So anyways, we cut back over to John, who's at that payphone. Remember payphones? And
I do.
the whole thing is he's like, oh man, this is awesome. He finds out that the plate at the bottom's broken. So if you put money in, it spits the money back out to you. So you can essentially have all the free phone calls you want. And it's weird because it's one of those things where generationally, like we get it because we still lived in a world pre-cell phone. But then like the next generation, I feel like that's going to be a really hard thing. If someone, 10 years younger than us was to watch this episode, can they relate to this in a way that they can make sense of it?
And even the modern take of it, because when cell phones first came out, it was a lot like landline phones, where it was like, look, it costs money to call unless you're calling local. If you call far away, it's expensive, but it's free nights and weekends. And that was like a big thing when we were growing up for landlines too, right? Like you can call 6 p.m. for free or whatever. And now we live in a world where like data is unlimited, calling is unlimited.
Remember when we used to text you just one letters because you'd get so many parents would get so mad.
Yeah, because texts cost 10 cents a piece and we were 15. You dickhead.
Well, you made the mistake of bringing it up. Hey, don't do that. So, of course, you're going to get more.
A few times I can think like over our lives where Joe was like extremely rattled over something we were doing. And that was one time specifically that he was so mad.
I was very upset. Yeah, I don't usually get mad like that about that sort of stuff. That was not going to be a fun conversation. And guess what? Spoiler alert, when that bill came, not a fun conversation. And me saying my rest about ragamuffin friends were trying to pull a prank on me did not make them feel better about paying that bill.
We're such rapscallions.
$6?
I know. It couldn't have been that much.
No,
Yeah.
no. $6 would have been one Gordo conversation while we were watching wrestling.
It wasn't that many anyways, in any event. So at the revelation that this payphone is now free, everybody just beelines it over. Because again, people don't have phones in their pockets all the time. And now we have a chance to make free phone calls anywhere in the world we want to because we have an unlimited like coin. that we can keep popping in.
Long distance in 1978 too was about $6 every 5 minutes. So that's expensive for a long call.
That's crazy expensive, yeah.
But were none of them using this phone all this time? Like this random guy comes in and discovers that?
Probably not.
They may have used it, but I think it gets serviced every now and again because the guy who owns the phone collects the money. So he must have forgot to lock the
he
panel
didn't
in.
close it. Okay, that makes more sense.
Because he probably has to empty it out every, week, month, whatever he does.
That was also people I don't know if you still can. You can't up here anymore. I think in Boston when we moved, you could still, but there are still people who have to go and unlock and take all the money out of parking meters. You know what I mean? That's a person's job, and they would get robbed constantly because you'd be walking down the street with a few $100 in change, which is a pain in the ass. It's not worth robbing somebody over, but
Easy to hide, though.
No, it's not.
That's way harder to hide. What are you talking about?
I'm sorry. It's easier to hide the crime because you can just buy a couple of packs of gum with the quarters. No one's going to question you if you have a couple of quarters on you.
Yeah, but you're not robbing somebody for 75 cents, Gord.
Unlimited laundry. Think about it.
For laundry, if you're going to a laundromat, having those quarters is important.
And then you can rob the laundromat. Double up.
Is it laundromat or laundromat?
Laundromat.
It is?
It's spelt laundromat usually, but I think everyone just says laundromat.
No one says laundromat.
People on this conversation have just said it.
You're all weird.
Yeah, we're the weird ones. So the line forms for this phone, and then they're like, hey, Alex, do you want to make a call? He's like, nah, I don't have anyone to call. And then there was the worst dubbed voice stuff. I don't know if you guys caught it. And it's like him and John are there, and he's like, there's going to be someone somewhere you want to call. He's like, oh, well, no, not now. And it's just you just see their heads are turned, so it's the back of their heads. And clearly they had to re-record the audio for that, but it wasn't an important enough part of the scene that they could have just did without it.
Yeah, when he said, I've got no one to call, they hammered in so many times in the next 5 minutes that you didn't need this additional dialogue.
Yeah, it's not the only time it comes up, so it's not like by cutting it, it would have been, ruining anything in the story later. But first we have Bobby, and he's there making a call, and he calls the National Theatre of London, and he wants to speak to Laurence Olivier, and just to applaud his work, basically. And somehow he gets through to the secretary because he's like, I can't believe it. I didn't think I would get through to you on the phone. Oh, wow. Laurence Olivier's secretary. I thought he was doing a really good job here, and I'm a big fan of him, and we brought him up a couple of times, but Jeff Conaway, who plays Bobby, had a very well-known historic issue with substances, and this was already a problem when this show started. And it's just curious to me, someone like him, why? I know he's a great actor, and I thought in this scene especially, I thought he was doing wonderful. He's super charismatic.
He's great in this.
But why take that risk on someone who has a really, really bad active substance abuse issue?
I mean, maybe they didn't know that badly,
Do you remember when he was on VH1's Celebrity Rehab?
Yeah, he was a Celebrity Rehab guy.
That was awful.
He was just fucking dead in a chair most of the time.
It was so sad, but obviously years later, but here it was a known issue. And I just wonder sometimes, because you hear all these times where shows start and we're hiring all these people, and a show like this, 1 million people are auditioning for that role, and you take a risk on someone. It's just so weird to me that things like that'll happen, and you passed up on how many millions of people that are less of a risk, I guess.
It's so 5 guys can talk about it.
Yeah, down the road. I had read that Robert Englund was someone who auditioned for the role, by the way.
Get out of town!
Imagine Jeff Conaway as Freddy Krueger.
Yeah, the reverse.
Wow, Laurence Olivier's teenage daughter. Slash, slash, slash.
I was going to bring it up later when we get into the Latka character, but from what I read, Robert Englund and Andy Kaufman were neighbors, and he read for Latka, I think, at first, or whatever it was, and then basically was saying something about so you want me to do an Andy Kaufman impersonation. They didn't know who Andy Kaufman was, and then he was the one who put him on to doing the show. So Robert Englund was the reason Andy Kaufman ended up on Taxi.
Another reason that Robert Englund is just a all-time hero.
And was oh, why did I open my mouth? I read it, the way I read it, it said that he auditioned for Bobby, but maybe they miswrote it and he was supposed to go for Latka.
It worked out fine, though, because we got Andy Kaufman in this and we got Freddy, so.
Yeah.
And Robert Englund, also star of Phantom of the Opera.
Yo, I love that movie.
That's a good one, yeah.
People sleep on that.
To close out Bobby's call, when he's trying to like leave a message with the secretary to give to Lawrence when he's done with his performance, because he's all out, he's literally in the middle of a curtain call right now. He's like, just tell him I said, and he just starts applauding.
I thought this was kind of stupid, actually.
I enjoyed this. I thought it was like, it showed how much he really cared about being an actor, right, in his craft. That he just wanted to call and applaud a world-renowned theater actor.
I will say, because I don't want to keep gushing on the show over and over, because I do want to say things that I thought, were glaring holes. The fact that obviously we have a story we're trying to tell here with Alex's character, but this whole thing where everyone has a chance for a free phone call, and every 2 seconds someone's like, Alex, don't you want to make a call? Hey, Alex, don't you want to use the phone? Like, why is everyone so concerned with like if Alex wants to make a phone call or not? There's a line 15 long. It was like, Alex, you can cut me if you want. Like, why does everyone keep doing that?
Is he like the head cab driver or something? That's the only thing I can think of.
He seems like because they're all like kind of just like, he seems like a father figure almost to like the younger guys at least, and like he's teaching Latka English and stuff like that. He just seems, like the wise old, cab
He's
driver.
the cab
there.
daddy.
He reminded me of, I know we talked about it in the chat earlier, but like making jokes about Taxi Driver, which was right before this as well, but the character of Wizard in Taxi Driver, right? Like that's the same thing. There's a one guy in the crew who everybody goes to, who's been there a long time, teaches the new people the ropes.
So then Tony gets up to make his call. Like I said, same thing. Alex, do you want my turn? He's like, no, go ahead. So he's like, oh, I'll make a quick call. And then he calls Bangkok because apparently he was in the service and wanted to make a phone call to his old massage parlor that he visited.
It's like 12 hours difference from here to Thailand. Like, so I really wanted to know what time they were at here. I guess a den of inequity or a house of ill repute operates 24/7, but
Just say whorehouse.
It was a massage parlor. It was called VIP Massage Parlor.
yeah, they didn't
That's what
say
it was.
whorehouse. They said massage parlor. I just assume it was a very nice shiatsu massage that Tony received.
I'm not here to assume, Michael. Okay.
Now, if you guys could call anywhere in the world,
In the world. Well, here's the thing.
We can now,
like,
though.
let's say back then there was we lived in a world with the same type of phone call restrictions.
Yeah.
You would call anywhere in the world. Like, I don't have ties to anywhere outside of like my general area that like it makes sense for me to get on the phone and be able to just speak with someone.
Yeah, but we could make prank calls to other countries.
Make a prank phone call.
I would prank call Australia and ask how their toilet is flushing.
Oh, is that a skibbity toilet going the wrong way?
It was a Simpsons joke, actually, Ferg.
Hi, Prime Minister.
$900 dues.
I guess it's a big beer. But yeah, it's kind of weird now thinking about it because we could just call anywhere and you could just Google the phone number. You'd have to call the operator. Like, it's just a different world.
And the idea that maybe it was easier to get in touch with people when you could have the operator give you anyone's number. I don't know. The fact that like Bobby was able to get in touch with the secretary, you know what I mean? Like, was it
had
as
to be
easy as that?
listed, though. It wasn't like you couldn't just be like, hey, connect me to throw out a random name. Like,
Well,
it
he's
had to
calling
be
a business, though. He's calling the theater, right? He's not calling, I guess, an individual, so...
So it's like, it's not like, I mean, yeah, like to relate, right? So he loves that. But like, if I was to be like, oh, I want to call Japan and call the Tokyo Dome, like, who am I talking to though? I'm just talking to the guy who works like what's the conversation going to be?
Can I speak to the Great Muda, please?
Mist blows through the phone at you. Goddamn.
Is Tiger Mask 8 or whatever they're on? Is he there right now?
Yeah. Tiger Mask is busy filming his cartoon right now.
So it cuts over, and this is when we see Elaine walk in for the first time, and that's Marilu Henner. She walks over to Louis' cage area, and she's introducing herself. And at first, he's all like excited in the moment, and he's, oh, like, hello there, ma'am. And as soon as he finds out that she's there to be a cab driver, it doesn't matter how attractive she is. She's a worthless cabbie in his brain, and he switches it on a dime, and I really like that.
This scene is just like in Batman Returns when he meets Catwoman, and he's all like turned on. He's like, show my French flipper trick. And then she doesn't want to have sex with him. And he's like, you lousy minx, you gave me all the signals. Like, he just does the entire Catwoman interaction here, and it's so funny.
And he's like, what do you mean busting my chops and make me believe you're a regular person? He was like pissed that she was a cabbie.
When we've talked about it in a few different episodes, but after Reba, when you see Van naked in the first episode of Shameless, and it was just like jarring to me. I really watched so much Taxi as a kid that like Marilu Henner exists as Elaine. I know she's on other stuff, but like that's how she is. Last year, I was going through a bunch of Burt Reynolds movies I had never seen, and there's one called The Man Who Loved Women, and then all of a sudden, she's topless in it, and it was just as jarring, where I was like, oh my god, Elaine is naked in this movie. Like, my brain like could not handle it.
Hold on, let me write that down real quick.
Is that like watching Always Sunny in Philadelphia and finally seeing Danny DeVito's bare ass?
When he came out of the chair?
Yeah, when he came out of the chair.
Did you guys know that she has a very rare disease, that she is one of 100 people in the world that has it?
Yes, I do know.
It's called highly superior autobiographical memory.
She remembers in great detail every single day of her life from 12 years old on.
Sounds like a superpower, not a disease.
Well, it technically is. It's an abnormality. So, like, it is, even though it's not like a negative thing, but
yeah.
She's like a very specific supervillain about herself.
That's such a weird amount of knowledge to have. You know what I mean? That's so many days.
It really is.
When I was reading that too, it made me just think of like how our brains just kind of remember the high points or like interesting points. You know what I mean? Like a year from now, if we talk about recording this episode, you might think of a minute of it or something. You know what I mean? Like we just like that was just a thing you always do anyway. On to the next thing.
Yeah, I remember the early days, you know, but now we're so many episodes in where like I had a pretty good, like I could recount a lot of different things, you know, from each episode, but it's just too many. There's just, your brain only has so much hard drive. You know what I mean? Like you can only remember
days
so
of
many
work
things.
are just the same, but you'll remember stuff you wish you didn't remember all the time.
Sure.
So there's that.
We had a guy go to our high school. I remember one of those like motivational speakers. It might have even been the she gave me the finger guy. He was kind of going over like how the brain remembers things and how there's like a line of files, but like with time, like certain ones just drop off to make room for like other things. Like you physically only have so much capacity for like how many things you can remember.
What's weird is that you remember him saying that.
Yeah. It's things stand out. It happens all the time because like when you have conversations with friends, especially depending on like where you sit in someone's life, like the significance or how frequently or infrequently you see a person. So, like, I've had so many encounters with people where they go, oh, man, Jay, remember that time we're at this and you said this? And I'm like, no, I don't remember that. But, like, that might be one of their soul memories of me from whatever, you know? So it's like, it's interesting how that stuff works.
This is like the Raul Julia monologue at the end of
Street Fighter,
where he's like, to you, it was the worst day of your life. To me, it was Tuesday. Like it just depends on who you are.
Surprisingly good Raul Julia impression.
Thank you. That movie that's dedicated to his memory. What a sad movie to be dedicated to you.
I forget the exact number this is. We're somewhere around 165-ish episodes. I don't remember specifically. But Berg adds memories. So, like, if you were to ask him, I think he thinks we've done about 250 different episodes if you ask him every show we've covered. I was listening back the other day when we were doing when we did Mom, which was a few weeks ago, and I was like listening back to like make clips and stuff, and the waiter's name was Greg. Ferg mentioned specifically how we covered Dharma and Greg. No, we didn't. I didn't catch it.
But he confused it with
Mike and Molly.
No, something we did do that.
No,
was
you're thinking of a different time. He confused something.
It wasn't Will and Grace. It was the
Mad About You, but it was a different. That was a different time. He confused something.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
that was a different episode where he confused something for Mad About You.
I will say though, we've covered 164 sitcoms. It does start to blend.
Oh yeah, I've wondered if we were to all sit down and like you gave us like you have 10 minutes, write down as many episodes as you can remember. I'm like curious how many I'd be able to get down.
There's some fuzzy ones, but the one that blows my mind is the Malcolm in the Middle thing, because it really, I had vivid memories of covering it, and we hadn't at the time.
But now we have, so go back and listen to it if you haven't yet.
Now we have.
We've not covered Dharma and Greg, though. Maybe
no, we've not.
Days.
We will. I'm sure it's coming soon.
Anyways, to get back into this, Elaine, when she's done with her interactions with Louis, walks over to like the bench. She has to fill out all this paperwork. She ends up sitting like next to where Alex is hanging around, and they have like a quick dialogue there. And she said, and Alex says to her, "Oh, don't get too upset with Louis. He's really a nice guy. He'd give you the scales off his back."
This is a weird thing for me, right? Because this is the time we get where we start trying to not know if we like or dislike Alex until the very end of the episode, where they really kind of go left and right in his character.
Alex is just hardened, I think, or he's just, I don't know,
he's a little lecherous to Elaine, though. Like when she starts talking about being being a masseuse, he turns around and he's like, oh, like he gets a little horned up at her.
That's where I struggle with this pilot, is because I have such fond memories of Alex and the show being about him and him being a stand-up guy. And this episode doesn't paint him in a very good light, and it really messed with my head.
I'll say I looked at it different on the second view. We're going to get into this all very soon anyways, but I do think there's some key elements to the story that do help his character. But I just think when you look at this show and you look at a lot of these people, and you have like Tony, the dumb fighter, and then Bobby, the dreamer actor, and Latka, the whatever the fucker Latka is. And then you have Alex, who's like so authentically just a New York cabbie. He's just a very different role in the show, and he's the grounded one, you know, but he's a little more rough around the edges because he's a little more seasoned and a little more gritty, and he's seen more. And his interaction here with Elaine is, you know, she's saying like, oh, like I'm here, but like this is just a part-time job for me. Like I have another job. He's like, oh yeah, sure. She's like, oh, you know, I'm not like really a cab driver. He's like, no. He's an actor and he's a prize fighter, and that girl over there is a writer. He's like, me, I'm a cab driver. I'm the only cab driver who works here. Like, and I thought that really does aid to like him just being a more realist compared to everybody else.
You know what that scene reminds me of? The scene of Shawshank Redemption when they're all saying they're innocent. Like, yeah, I'm innocent too.
Yeah, I can see exactly how you got there.
But I thought that was a really good scene for him because he's been there, right? And you would assume there was probably a point where he was Elaine and he walked in, he's like, oh, I'm just doing this part-time. And, you know, you get into that. It's like I would say almost all of us. Nick, I guess maybe you came into your job at a little bit different of a point than when me and Ferg did, but like, I think you probably got your job with the intentions of being there for a while. Ferg, I think maybe I could speak for both of us. Did you think you'd be at your job for a long time?
No, it was just more money than the job I was at, and I had a baby coming.
Yeah, I was looking for something different, and I was trying to transition and just kind of get away from what I was doing for all those years. I never thought I'd be 12 years into working in the same place. Like, you just, no, I'll be here. Maybe a couple of years, we'll see what else pops up, but like, you know, just a change of pace. And here you are. And like, I'm sure with a lot of those cab drivers, they walk in as, oh, I'm not a cab driver, I'm this or that. And it doesn't work out that way. You just end up being a cab driver.
I was just going to ask, is like the New York job market like tough at this time?
Ferg, I don't know. When I think about it, think about like Uber now, right? And there's a lot of people who have other jobs, but they Uber on the side. Now in New York, there's such a gigantic demand and need for cab drivers that maybe that's just kind of the same thing. You know, like you do your job, but like, hey, when I need a little extra money, like I'll go pick up a few fares. I'll go buy the cab thing. And I don't know how the thing works with the license, but it looks like you can kind of be in and out.
The old side hustle.
So I think it's just that. I just think it really is. It mirrors the way an Uber driver is today. But in that, you could just kind of jump in and do it when you want. So it's kind of the side gig to get extra money when your primary isn't really paying everything off.
All right, that makes sense.
Isn't the whole point, though, a Hackney license, though, is that you'd have to get one of those?
Yes, that was like the requirement.
So that was my thing, too, is like, I don't think it's an easy thing to get a hack license.
It's not. It's like liquor licenses. Like, there's only so many allowed.
No, you're thinking of medallions.
The medallions that you're thinking of. So hack licenses aren't actually that hard to get, but medallions were insanely hard to get, and the mob was a big part of it, and they were crazy expensive. Now they're fucking useless and worthless, which is super funny.
But I think at this time, especially New York City, maybe the mecca for like they're making money. It seems like just like the way that they're, you know, portrayed and stuff like that, they don't seem like it. But I feel like a cab driver in the late 70s in New York City was probably raking in some dough.
What you're forgetting too, though, is the late 70s New York City was like a super fucking dangerous place too, though, right? So you're also a person driving around with cash all night, and it's like you know, you have that thing going on.
Right.
I mean, the Zodiac Killer, one of his few known kills was a cab driver, right? Like they were easy targets.
Right.
So the key to not having all that cash on you is if you actually turn driving a cab into a game show and you give all that cash back to
just give it to the people in the cab.
I don't know, call it cash cab or something like that.
That guy's actually a really funny comedian. I see him pop up a lot recently, actually.
He seems like the kind of comedian who, like, won't offend anybody. I mean, I'm not thinking in the bad way, like the kind of person who could do like a Tonight Show slot where like
No, he's actually, from what I've seen, Ben Bailey is his name. He pushes the envelope a little bit.
He actually had to get the cab driving license.
He did, yeah.
Thing. He's like, if the show ever gets canceled, I can actually just drive a cab. And
can you imagine though getting in a cab with him after?
And it's
like,
just a regular cab ride. Like you see him like, oh my God. And you get excited. You think you're about to win like $500. And he's like, nah, I don't do that anymore. This is regular cab.
Yeah.
So then anyways, to go back, Elaine and Alex are kind of closing out their conversation. He's telling her like, sorry, no offense to you, but I'm sure you're very interesting, but I don't know if you're as interesting as a massage parlor in Bangkok. And she's like, well, don't be too sure until you get to know me better. And that's when, you know, you guys said it earlier. He's like, oh, and he's like, she goes immediately, he's like, no, I'm kidding. I'm not serious. I'm all talk, really. Like, I like that she was like trying to have fun, like real quick. And it was like, it was kind of flirty when she said it. But as soon as like his eyebrows raised, she's like, never mind.
Said one thing too much.
You gotta imagine too, like that job environment is not unlike how mine was when I first got to my job, where it was 90-something% male. So it's like a wolf's den when a woman walks in there. So, you know, as soon as she says anything that's even like remotely jokey or flirty, it's all of a sudden you just see like the saliva fall from these guys' faces.
see, I disagree. They kind of really pay her no mind. You'd think that they'd be all over her the second she walks in. I mean, Alex really only.
Alex had interaction with her. I think everyone's very locked into this phone call thing at the moment.
Laka has one later.
Yes, we'll get to that.
They line up like they're in prison.
Well, it's like, remember, again, it's tough to relate. That's the hard part for us. You kind of know what they're going through, but it's been so long since you've been in that world. And even when we were alive, we weren't at a point where the idea of a free phone call meant much to us, you know, because we were too young to be paying for anything on our own anyways.
I've been at my job for going on 14 years. When I first started, there was still a payphone. I mean, they haven't been gone that long.
There's still one in our town, and somebody just cut off the phone, but not the cord. So, like, sometimes I'm, like, walking to get coffee, and you just see the sad dangling little metal cord. Like, whatever company should just come and take this whole thing off, right?
Well, you know what people are doing? They're cutting the cord and taking the copper out of them because they had copper wiring on the inside. Same with those Tesla chargers.
That's so much work for so little money. Like, the risk of, like, getting caught breaking a payphone to get 30 cents of copper out of it.
I'm sure the guy broke the change thing and there was no money in it. It's, I gotta get something.
Yeah, right, like a second plan. I guess, though, probably people who are resorting to that are probably the people who are doing probably the cheaper of the drugs, and you don't need a ton of money.
So, to go back, Alex walks over, you see Tony on the phone, and this is when he announces himself. He gets in touch with his parlor. Like, I'm calling from the USA. I'd like to speak to number 12. And just the idea of, like, the woman that he wants to talk to so bad, like, he never even found out her name. Just like he just, you know, basically ordered her off the menu. Oh, she's not there?
I would have loved to have heard him try to pronounce like a Bangkok name, though. Like, the fucking Tony Danza accent.
Like punch drunk Tony Danza saying, yeah.
When he finds out she doesn't work there anymore, and he's like, oh, well, all right, so long. Hangs up and he tells him, like, yeah, since the war's been over, they only go up to number 9. Demand isn't there anymore.
Can you imagine getting laid off from a Bangkok? Or I was like, what a bummer that conversation is. Like, here's your severance.
All the American soldiers are gone. They're just like keeping us like far into the green.
A 25% reduction in staff, though. That's a big hit.
And then he's asking, you think number 12 ever thinks of me? Like, well, how many times did you see her? Oh, like 10 or 20 times. How long were you there for? A day. Like, yeah, she probably remembers you then.
I loved Judd Hirsch's delivery there. She probably remembers you.
He had sex with a woman 20 times in a day. That's amazing. Also, I used to look up facts of things, especially what things cost, but I didn't think to look up what the going rate for a Thai sex worker in the late 70s was. I imagine.
Sure you didn't.
My phone's just on fire right now. But I did look it up in incognito mode, unlike some people I know.
Nothing to hide. Again, we get the whole, Alex, why don't you make a call? Because everyone is so obsessed with the idea. Even though there's a line 2 hours long to make a phone call, everyone wants Alex to make a phone call.
hey, everybody, Alex is going to make his call. Let's all surround him.
No, he's like, I was thinking about calling my kid. And that's when everyone's like, wait, you have a kid?
Which is crazy because he's like the Yoda of this whole place, right? Everybody looks up to him, but they don't even know this like very important part of his life that you think would have come up in conversations before.
No, he's not like Yoda. He's more like Darth Vader because he abandons his kids.
Also, he chopped his kid's hand off. I don't know much about Star Wars.
He tells everyone, well, I'm not really involved in her life. I haven't seen her in 15 years. And Elaine's pretty, like, pissed off without knowing any of this story.
She gets real judgy real quick.
My ex-husband was right. He's not the worst there. There is. It's like, oh, all right, so you made your mind up about me already? I'm a heel? I abandoned my daughter, and now you're just going to shun me, huh? That was actually, I know we do the wrestling stuff all the time. I didn't know heel was that much of a term outside of the wrestling world.
Oh, yeah.
I just thought, like, it started there and then kind of, like, branched out. I never really hear people say it outside of in that context.
Yeah, I'd be lying if I knew the origin of it. I've only ever heard it in wrestling.
No, it comes up in even shows we covered. I forget one. Somebody says, you must think I'm a real heel, huh? Which is like...
But I always thought that's like the context of it. Like it starts there. Although it could have started there. But it's always weird to hear it being used outside of that world. But Alex explains his story a little bit. He has like a pretty good dialogue, like a monologue where he's talking to Elaine. And he's basically going over the situation was, I was with this girl. We had a child. We were together for a couple of years. She met a guy from South America. She wanted to move there with the kid. She said to me, like, if you really love your daughter, don't contact her because it's going to be too confusing for her. And then he just kind of like backed away and let this dude be the father of his child. And he said, like, I don't know. I guess I wasn't that smart. Like, I bought it. So he does explain it. So we talked about it earlier, like the light that he's painted in. It's not that he was just abandoning his child or just like decided to leave or like he was specifically told it would be best for her if you left.
That's a fucking cop-out.
Yeah, but he cops to that later.
And he does cop to it later, yeah. So he does get redemption for it, but you do feel for him, right? Where like he knows he did a dumb thing, but at the time he thought he was doing the right thing, I guess.
Yeah, but the only thing that'll make him call her is a free phone.
Yeah, look, I will say 15 years is a long time to not find a time to pick up the phone.
She lives in like Brazil. It's not like it's not
his
like
daughter.
It's an easy phone call.
It's his daughter. I'm not taking she lives in Brazil as an excuse on that.
No, I'm saying in the scope of things though, under the situation, right? He was kind of instructed stay away from her. All these years are passing. Now there's this weird opportunity where, hey guys, you can all make phone calls anywhere in the world. And all these guys like, I'm calling Bangkok. I'm calling London. And now he's thinking like, well, you know, my daughter's in Brazil. Like, I can see how that train of thought is spiking in this moment.
Sure, I just would have probably thought of that many more times in 15 years.
Sure, and it may not have been the first time he thought of it, but because he said it out loud, other people started pushing him like, no, you got to do this. You got to do this. He's probably had that thought internally a million times. If he didn't say it out loud to the people around him and they didn't push him, he wouldn't have done it then either.
He also could have fought back 15 years ago because it's not like she was pregnant and just had a baby. No, he raised that kid for 2 years.
Her for a couple years.
It's like, that's where I was still kind of on his side at this point. And like, I didn't realize, like, it comes up later when he meets the daughter, which we'll get to, but he had raised her for 2 years. How do you just, all right, take my kid? Like, no.
Yeah.
Berg, you've been a dad for a long time now. I just had a kid, and I figured you and I would be able to relate to this, and I can only imagine even more so. But the idea of this to me now, I'm like, this like actually kind of like affected me a little bit. I was like, how could you do that?
I've seen crazy stuff. All different situations. I've seen people remove themselves completely. I've seen people where they can't imagine themselves without, but that's obviously much longer stories for a different day. I'm just saying in this context, the way he explained it, it wasn't crazy. Like I could see his angle, whether or not you agree with it or.
Sure, they give him the out.
Yeah, it made some sense. Still wasn't enough for Elaine though, because she's like, "I'm sorry about what I said before. You're not a heel. You're a jerk." It's like, what? Like,
I'm with Elaine.
Was enough to not make him a jerk, but yeah, she said, whatever to what you agreed to before. Like that shouldn't stop you from picking up the phone right now and calling. And you got Louis in the background chiming in out of nowhere. He's like, Leave the man alone. If he doesn't give a damn about his kid, that's his business.
They give him so little, and he does so much with it in this episode. Him and Andy Kaufman get very little and just spread it so far.
Sometimes with the more extreme characters, and we've talked about this in other episodes, less is more. Because sometimes you have those characters. We mentioned Wings. Who is the dude in Wings? The mechanic guy.
Lloyd.
We talked about it before. His character was funny, but he was so dumb that if you got too much Lloyd, you'd get sick of him. So it's kind of, and I want to say in the moment we might have compared him to Jim, which is kind of weird full circle.
If you think about the show as a whole, everybody except Alex is kind of very brief.
Well, you have a nice ensemble cast, and they're doing a pretty good job of giving everybody spotlights and kind of like individual moments. So you're getting enough to learn these characters without just kind of mashing them all to you at once, and then no one really has time to shine. So it's kind of, you have a moment where now Bobby's getting a little monologue. Now Tony's saying something. Now John's saying something. So it's like a kind of a good way to just get you from person to person and give everyone like their moment, which is, I think, a product of good writing.
I like that they all have their moment, but Tony Danza's is he loses all of his fights and goes to prostitutes.
Yeah. Well, no, okay, he served his country and then got prostitutes.
Yeah, they do make it a point. I mean, we're right after the Vietnam War ended, right? Only a couple
2 or
years,
3
really.
years, maybe.
Yeah. It was very commonplace to do that in that scenario at that time.
Was he a boxer before he was an actor?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he legit was a boxer. Yeah, it's come up before.
I didn't want to just say it. So I asked. I remember like hearing that.
He's also a garbage man too, right?
I love when that happens so much. It's my favorite thing in the world.
I don't even know where you were going with that one.
The trash kick, the Philadelphia
The
Eagles
Philadelphia, the trash kicking
God
field.
Damn it. Fuck you, Gordo. You're fucking fired. How fucking dare you?
So
The trash kicking, field goal picking, whatever that movie is. That's a watch along we need to do.
So Alex is finally on board. He's like, you know what? Fine, I'll make the call, but I'll do it later. Right now, there's a really long line. Maybe I'll do it tomorrow or something.
Hello, operator. Brazil, please.
Yeah. Everybody
essentially what
parts
happens.
like the Red Sea and like creates it so he can. Everyone who is like desperate, like butt to nuts in line trying to make a phone call. Everybody who's obsessed with Alex is like, you know what? It's Alex's time. So everyone just separates. Then you have Elaine grab him by the arm. He makes the comment that it feels like a wedding thing. It looks it. Like they're like walking down the aisle, like arms locked down to the phone. And the perspective of the camera is showing them walking down like that line of people. But he gets on the phone and he's like, operator, Rio de Janeiro, please. And that's when you see Latka walk down for the first time as he's about to start making this phone call. And we mentioned it before, but that's Andy Kaufman. Andy Kaufman, I've mentioned already in this episode, one of my all-time favorite just people, like, because he was so interesting.
I was just going to say R.I.P. maybe.
R.I.P. maybe. But if you're listening, what's up, Andy?
As a group on here of people who grew up loving both comedy and wrestling and sitcoms, like Andy Kaufman is high esteem.
I was someone who, I was like deep in the trend. I used to I'm terrible at like just sitting down and reading books, but like I read multiple books on Andy Kaufman and was just super into him at a young age. And I gotta say, like, for years, I definitely held on to the idea of him still being alive for real, because he was just that kind of a mind. Like his brand of comedy was that extreme that like it made sense.
Well, let's dig him up and find out.
Do you guys remember this played all the time when we were kids on Comedy Central, back when they played like the same 12 things over and over again? The documentary I'm from Hollywood, the Andy Kaufman wrestling documentary.
Yeah, I'd watched it anyways.
I do, yeah.
And anybody who's listening who hasn't seen it is completely worth seeing, because it goes over everything he did in wrestling, which is amazing. But one of the best things about it is all of the talking head interviews are all the members of Taxi, right? And like Robin Williams and all these people, and they just kayfabe the whole thing, which is totally amazing. I have it on DVD. We watched it maybe a year ago. I hadn't seen it since we were kids. And it's like Robin Williams being like, oh, he's too far gone. He thought he was really a wrestler. Ooh. He's like, it's just like, oh man, they like didn't even, like they kept up the lie for him. Like everybody respected Andy so much that even 10 years later doing this documentary, they like
I'm not sure if they were all keeping up the live form, though. I think he was kayfabing everybody in real life, and only very few people were probably in the know.
I think by 10 years in, people knew.
I remember reading Bob Zmuda's book about him, Andy Kaufman Revealed, and in the book, he's the one who like revealed like all the stuff on Letterman was like a work and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that was like the book is when he first like publicly announced that was not real.
And anybody who's not familiar, just go on YouTube and watch every single clip you can of Tony Clifton. It is one of the greatest characters of all time.
And then Tony Clifton famously was hired onto the show at Andy Kaufman's request and then fired from the show. But Tony Clifton was fired on Andy Kaufman.
And thrown out of the studio.
At times, Bob Zmuda was the man in the costume, though, so you don't even know who actually was there that day.
It is some genius level insanity that the two of them cooked up for sure.
Andy Kaufman, just a very unique person who did not really want to be on this show, but, you know, it was too much money to pass up. And that's another thing that's like so crazy. It kind of like when I was talking about Jeff earlier and like dealing with the risk of him, then you're throwing all this money at some dude who does not want to be there, has all these stipulations, has these demands, can only be in so many episodes per season, but it's like, we love this guy, we'll do whatever it takes. And that's so risky for a new show.
Isn't an actor either.
And he hated sitcoms.
I'd like to think that would be the only thing that we would not get along with Andy Kaufman about, is his dislike of sitcoms.
How do you, to get back into this though and reel it in, as we're seeing Lotka for the first time, like describe this character.
The mold for Fez.
Yeah.
The precursor.
But it's just a different time where he was just stereotypical foreign guy, and foreign equals funny.
It was from like Nowheresville, Europe, that like,
Yeah.
and he just has like a language of his own. He plays it very, he's like shy in a way. He's a quiet type character.
Yeah, I would say definitely like kind of shy and quiet makes sense. And I think the smart thing too is to make him from not a real place and to make him doing a completely made up language that doesn't sound like you're being racist by doing a joke on a language that exists. Like that only somebody like him would be able to pull off, where like it never feels like he's punching down on somebody or it's being a caricature. It's just like Eastern European somewhere joke.
Like, what's his name from Perfect Strangers?
Oh,
Balky?
Balky?
Yeah.
Like a precursor to Balky, because I think that came after.
I can see this as a precursor to Balky too, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll give you
Balky,
that.
a more extrovert character compared to like Lotka, but the foreign from a, you know, again, a fake land. And
Yeah, nondescript somewhere else far away.
But yeah, Lotka walks down while Alex is trying to make the phone call. And basically, I think Joe mentioned it earlier, like he's the one who's like helping Lotka learn English. So he has like this little book and he's trying to like basically go over like the new sentence that he learned with Alex. But you know, Alex is busy, like, hey, you know, not now, I'm on the phone right now. And he like looks so sad and he's just kind of standing there. He doesn't know what to do after he tells him no. So he's like, all right, go ahead. So he reads from the book and he's like, lesson 12. And he goes, thank you, chambermaid, for your excellent service. I am glad I don't require medical assistance. I can't do a Lotka voice, so I'm sorry, but
That was fine.
Yeah, that was fine.
That wasn't bad.
it's a lot high. I can't get like the higher. I didn't practice it, so it reminds me of the situation. I had a similar, not from a fake area in Europe, but there used to be this guy I worked with. His name was Yu Jing. He was like an old Asian man who worked with me when I worked at the supermarket when I was a kid, and he was like learning English because he was going for citizenship. And I'll never forget, I was like 15, 16, and I was like, I had like a shift that day, like just mopping and doing whatever that day. And I'm in like the closet, like getting like things together. And he like just walks up to me out of nowhere and just starts reading the Pledge of Allegiance like off a piece of paper, like no, just cold.
Did you like take your hat off, put your hand on your heart?
No, but he was like the nicest dude in the world. So, you know, he was much older than me. So if he's still around today, I hope he's doing well.
This very much too is the very first sketch joke from SNL, which is like the famous sketch of John Belushi given like things to say and then he has a heart attack. Yeah, like this is a couple years after that too. This feels very much like that character.
Alex is telling him like, hey, like, you know, these books, like, keep saying like chambermaid and stuff, like this isn't like real stuff. Like you got to read some of the stuff that I wrote on the back.
Yeah, it seems like this book is all chambermaid.
Yeah.
No, I think it was a book, just a normal book. It wasn't a like teach you English book. It was a normal book and he was translating words for him. That's why he could write what he wanted in the back and teach him. So I think chambermaid came up so often.
Maybe.
That's how I took it. I
He
don't
said
know.
all those phrases have chambermaid in it. So,
Maybe it's a book about a chambermaid.
but yeah, he wrote stuff on the back of the book for him to read that was like get off my back and give me a minute while I go to the can. Things that he thought would be more important for him to know modern day.
You know, I looked up when I was watching this, I was like, when did we start using the term the can for the bathroom? And I went down a rabbit hole, and it's just because a can is something that usually holds liquid. That's basically what it boils down to when you go through a long time. And
That was less interesting than you thought it was going to be, huh?
Yeah, and I was like, oh, okay, toilet holds liquid. Okay, there it is. Okay, that was 20 minutes of my life that I wish
In
I didn't waste.
1853, yeah.
You know what I thought about? Actually, I took the ferry the other day, and why is it called a head on a boat?
Because a head also holds liquid and you pee in it.
Oh, okay. I meant to look it up, and I completely forgot.
Any sailors on here, reach out.
Yeah, any seamen out there?
They named it after that MTV show, The Head.
Oh, MTV's Oddities? Great show.
I did enjoy the head. Not so much Eon Flux.
So anyways, we get to this point where the operator picks up. Alex asks for him to get connected. He can't even remember his ex's new last name, but it's Consuelos is her last name. So he's waiting for that. And you get the cutaway of Latka walking up to Elaine. And he starts talking to her in his language. One of you guys want to take a stab at it?
I didn't get this exchange. I missed something, I think.
Really? I thought it was very obvious. He was just basically trying to court her.
Okay, okay, that's what I was like. It can't be that brash, can it? But
Yeah, and he's walking up to he doesn't know like the way to do it properly. Like culturally, it's probably different here. But he just does his like hitting like trying to talk to her, and then he's asking.
Then he puts his head on her shoulder.
Well, he's asking to sit down first. So he's doing it in his language, but she's like, yeah, you can sit, essentially. And then as soon as he sits down, he just like rests up next to her and just like rests his head on her shoulder, and then just goes, bed? And she goes, no bed, no bed, no bed. And he just gets up and walks away.
And does the classic, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. I thought that was awesome. I love that part. So you didn't pick up, I just thought it was like blatantly him just saying.
No, I did. Okay, so I got that. I just didn't think, I was like, that can't be.
Were you expecting better pickup lines?
I guess. I don't know. I don't know if he was actually hitting on her. Like, because you don't really get a feel for Latka, right? Like, he could be like, just like this, like, you know, like cute, innocent foreigner, right? Like, but then he's immediately trying to court somebody with a huge language barrier. But
Well, Ferg brought up Fez earlier, right?
Hey, what is it? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right?
We get back to that phone call, and this is Alex finally getting in touch with his ex, Phyllis. I don't want to get into the whole thing. It's a very long dialogue. Essentially, in the call, he's finding out that he's asking to speak to his daughter. He was thinking about her. Finds out that she's leaving for Portugal for college, you know, trying to figure out, like, well, is she connecting through New York? Like, well, because we don't know where she's starting from. Oh, yeah, from Rio. No, it's going to be through Miami. So he's like, all right, well, I guess I can get to Miami to see her if she's going to fly out to Portugal. So, like, all of a sudden it's urgent. It goes from, like, I don't know if I should even call her to I must see her before she flies to Portugal. His phone acting here, though, again, I don't want to line for line because it was a long dialogue, but the way he, like, did his range of emotions and the way he timed things and paced it, his phone acting, I just think Judd Hirsch in general, his performance here was, like, great. For a one-way conversation where you're not hearing the other side, like, I just thought he kind of put on a masterclass.
Doesn't this seem like the scene they used for the audition?
Yeah, like this is the monologue he auditioned with. Yeah. I also feel like some of the stuff seemed improv too. It's like, Portugal? What's she, a big fan of sardines? Like that seems like the kind of stuff you just like throw out, you know?
Oh, I thought he said majoring in sardines.
Oh, majoring in sardines, yeah.
Now, I wonder if, like, for like a phone call like that, where is he just talking to no one, or is someone like on the other end, so he's got someone to go off of?
I mean, sometimes the director will be feeding the lines, or somebody else like off screen, but he's probably just going off of memory and just like waiting the right amount of time to keep going.
Now all of a sudden it's like he's hell-bent on, I'm going to go see her in Miami. I have to get there by tomorrow. And this is coming from New York. So he runs up to Louis. He's like, I need a cab for the weekend. I'm going to Miami. And now everyone's like really excited that he's going to try to reunite with his daughter. And Louis is adamantly against it. Like, we don't rent out cabs like that. And he's basically like, nah, I'm just going to take one. So now him Was it him,
5
Bobby,
people.
John, Tony, and Latka? I thought Latka joining was really weird in the
I enjoyed
situation.
Latka went for the ride, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, Latka's his actual friend, not John is just a tourist
This guy
who's in
just
New York
showed
all
up
of a
and
sudden.
got into a car for 25 hours with these 4 random people.
John's whole story here is very curious.
Let
He
me
just
tell you
needs
what
to-
I thought was going to happen. Because you know John had a lot of money and all big bills. I thought Louis was going to be pretty firm. No, you can't take it. And that dude was going to be like, okay, I'll hire a cab to take me to Miami. And that's why they were setting up him having so much money. And that's why they were keeping him there.
I kind of like the act of defiance and the camaraderie. Like, I think that was really good for like the group.
I think it also shows too that Louis has no power, because when you go into this, you think he's like the boss, right? But at this point, you realize he's just a different employee. He's just the dispatcher. It's just
And
a different
who's
job.
the boss?
Ooh, Mona.
Hey, oh, hey.
Hey, oh, hey, oh.
Is it Mona the towel? Oh.
Oh, I hope the towel will fall down,
When
Mona.
Louis is like, okay, hold everything. I got to get tough with you guys. And he gets out of the cage. And this is the thing where if you don't know Danny DeVito, like obviously he's a short guy. But if this is 1978 and you're not as familiar with him and you get the reveal and you see him elevated, so he's standing tall over everyone the whole time because of the cage. When he steps down and you see he's a good like 1.5 feet shorter than every other person in the scene, like it got like a great crowd reaction, which
yeah.
is very telling to how little known Danny DeVito was when the show came out.
Yeah, this is one of those ones where it had to have been the first take that worked, because the crowd went so wild when he steps down that I just feel like you wouldn't have gotten that energy
And
out
you
of
wouldn't
them
have
a
gotten
third
that kind
time.
of reaction if you were hyper aware of who he was.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
And also remember too, in 1978, I mean, there were VCRs at this point, but not really commercially available movies, right? So like if you saw Cuckoo's Nest when it came out, that was it. That was years ago. Like he might have remembered he was in it, right? Like, so it's hard to have memory for someone who's not on TV really or in movies all the time.
And then as they're like all running out, there's like that quick moment where he's like kind of chasing after them, but like he kind of gets stopped by like Latka just kind of standing in the doorway. He just gives them the, give me a minute while I go to the can. Thank you very much. And he like just like, he does that, like he goes from one side of the sliding door to the other. It's hard to describe verbally exactly how the scene looks, but it was done really well. It was very funny.
It was almost like in Laugh-In when people would pop up and say things, but he did two different people's part of it, right? Like he was on two different sides of the door.
Yeah. Laughing's a good analogy there because that's a show that happened at that time.
Man, that is a show that happened. That's great analysis, Gordo. Thank you so much for chiming in with that.
You know what?
Jesus.
You tried, bud. You tried.
I was on your side. You were coming back at me with the Laugh-In thing. I thought we were going to have a conversation, and you just puttered.
I'm so
out of gas
tired.
so
You know what?
quickly.
You can almost hear the boom, the power go. Yeah, it is like Laughing because that was the show.
Someone unplugged Gordo. The doodle unplugged you by accident as it walked by.
All right. Yeah, just wake me up at the green light of cancel. I'll give that to you.
So now we get to the, like, it's like a shot of them driving, and you just kind of get the narration from some of the characters as you see a car driving down the highway. Because now they're on the long trip from New York to Miami. This is, by the way, this is 16 minutes into the show. Like, this is the first time we get away from that one scene, is 16 minutes in.
Has anybody done this drive before, by the way? Because it's a long fucking drive.
Not that
No.
I would never. I would never.
White Pages went on tour once, and our first show was in Miami. So we left at like 6 a.m. from Boston. And I think the first day we made it to like North Carolina. And by the time we got to Miami, which if you think about it, aside from the Keys, is like as south as you can go. We're pretty up north. It was dark out when we got to Miami. You're in a car for a long, long time to do that.
I mean, if we were to say like, hey, let's do a road trip to Miami, that was like a multi-day stop here, stop here, stop here, stop here. Sure. But the act of like one straight drive just to get to the destination, the families would be like, oh, every year we would drive to Disney from the Northeast. Like, That doesn't even sound like that sounds awful.
Hey, they're professionals. They're cab drivers from
That's
New York.
true, actually. Yeah, they spend.
And they don't have to deal with New York traffic because they're actually leaving New York.
And they stuffed the third in the back. They should have just been like, hey, John, get the fuck out of here. We don't even know
Yeah,
you.
for real.
At least you feel safe though with your swapping drivers, right? Like you do it in shifts. You never have to.
Yeah,
really
it's
stop
all
except to
guys
go to
who are
the bathroom.
capable of like doing like 5 hours a piece or whatever. There's during the narration, there's a story Tony gives us about how he drove all the way down there for a fight once. It was a 23-hour drive. So he took a whole bunch of uppers. So when he got knocked out, he couldn't close his eyes. He's just like laying in the mat, eyes
loud.
opened.
I took a bunch of uppers and I saw someone naked, huh?
If I saw someone naked, I'd be uppers.
Yeah. Aw. Now we get the exterior shot of the Miami airport, which most of us have flown
No.
to. I mean, like me, Ferg, and
No.
Nick have done it together. Have you guys been to the Miami airport? Joe, did you fly? You just drove back and forth? But you
No,
went for
actually,
work too,
I
right?
had to go to Miami for work once, and we flew in and out of Miami.
The Miami airport, we see a little shot of like stock footage type of shot real quick. They have done 0 renovations to that airport since 1978.
They really, yeah.
That's one of those airports too, where like I feel like for us specifically in Boston, a lot of people don't have this, but like the airport in Boston is just in the middle of fucking everything. So if you ever fly to Boston because you want to do something here, you're at anything you want to do in like 2 minutes. You fly to Miami, you're like, cool, we're gonna go to like Miami Beach, and you're in a cab or an Uber or whatever for like 40 minutes. It takes so fucking long.
That's most places, though. Yeah, you take it for granted in Boston.
As someone who works at an airport, Miami's an airport I've always just been aware is a huge airport. And I guess I associated huge and busy with they must renovate it then.
That was my thing with LAX. LAX, like you see it all the time in every movie and TV show that's based in Los Angeles. LAX gets mentioned. Somebody's taking a flight. It is such a shithole, that fucking airport. I can't believe, like, this is like Hollywood's airport. Make it look less shitty, at least.
I wonder if there are like rooms where like the Hollywood people get to go hang out though, that like people like us would just never see.
They
that are really
don't have
nice.
to go to the airport. They just fucking.
They usually get like driven like VIP through security, like out exterior, and then go straight up.
Also, too, it's not like a road or something that needs to be maintained every 2 years.
No, it doesn't
Like you don't
have
do a
to, but like
complete facelift.
the one I'm at, like they're constantly like the airline I work for does a lot. It's not always the airport itself. Usually it's the airlines that have to pay for a lot of the renovations because you still want to create a nice environment. Like, so if my airline fixes up the terminal that we're in, it's a more pleasurable experience. So then when you're flying out, you're like, oh, I like, without saying it, like, I like this airline's, like the aesthetic of it. I like, the seating area. So it makes you more prone to pick one over another, depending on the situation.
No. I mean, I get it, but you still get fingies in your butthole from TSA. So
I've never had that happen.
Yeah, you have a much different experience with TSA than I have, I guess.
Is that when you only fly international, Gordo? Is that like not a domestic thing?
Because I work there, I will say I've had more TSA pat downs, I'd imagine, than the rest of you, because sometimes just working it happens. But I will also say never once have they stuck a fingy in my butthole. That's happened 0 times.
Just after
That's why you keep the bomb in your butthole, because they never check in there.
You'll never find it. One little minor touch that I really appreciated is when you see all the guys rush to the gate, it's an Iberia flight, and Iberia is a Portuguese airline. So it just seemed like really nice that they used a legit real airline that's regional for
I
that
thought
type of flight.
Iberia was Spain.
Spain
No.
and Portugal. It's like that general.
Oh, okay.
the Iberian Peninsula, if
Yeah.
you will.
So it was interesting that it wasn't just like trans air fake airline. They're like, they went authentic with it. And not only did they use a real airline, but they used a real airline that would be flying from Miami to Portugal.
Yeah.
It's good little details.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And maybe I just noticed again because of where I work, but I thought that was cool.
Well, that's exactly why, yeah. Because I noticed the same, yeah.
I noticed that too, and I thought that was a nice
So
touch.
yeah, a detail that would only be fun for people who work at airports and Portuguese people. But they get up to the gate and the girl's asking like, "Hey, can I have your ticket and passport?" Alex saying, "Hey, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just looking for someone." This is also at a time of the world pre an event in 2001. I don't want to get too into it, but security was a lot different back then. And so you can just go to the gate. There was no like security checkpoints that stopped you without a boarding pass back then. Also, you could just mention a person's name on the flight and they'll go, "Yep, they're here. Do you want me to point them out?" Like that also would never happen now.
Well, I was just going to say, if you look at like newspapers up until in our lifetime, it'll be like Greg Smith of 1437 Atwater Drive, like they just would post everybody's address. It's like that's the crazy thing you would never do now.
Well, they're dead. They don't mind.
Not obituaries, like any article about a person. Like go look at like newspapers.com and archives.
Oh, I thought you said obituary. I was going to say, what do they care? They're dead.
It wasn't illegal back then. Now it's doxing and it's not legal.
I remember, we've mentioned it before. I remember being arrested at 17 and nothing big. We won't get into it now. I think we've told it in the past. But when it was in like the police blotter, like that week in our local paper, it was I'm underage and it's my name with my address. And I'm like, is that okay to do?
Yeah, the fact that you're underage really makes that not legal.
Yeah, I felt like
so
that
weird.
can't be right. But anyways, she asked if she should point her out for Alex, and he's like, no, if genetics work, I should be able to figure out which ones she is.
I was hoping the joke here would be that he got the first one wrong.
I thought that's where they were going too. That would have made sense.
But yeah, he does figure it out. He walks up to the first girl he walked up to, and he taps her on the back, and Kathy Consuelos, and she turns around, and you know he's like, "Hey, I'm sorry, I'm sort of your father." And she goes, "You're Mr. Rieger?" And I was like, "That's a weird, first off, a weird reaction, and then also a weird way to address him. Even though you don't have ties to him as your father, like you wouldn't know him as Mr. Rieger."
I mean, maybe that's just like what her mom always called her. Yeah, and that's why she says that.
He was spoken about around her mostly.
Yeah, like your father, Mr. Rieger.
It seemed, I don't know, really flagged to me. It felt odd, but just in general, her reaction was just like, "Huh? Well, what do you know?"
Yeah, she wasn't the best actress. Oh, she just didn't have the best material, I think.
I mean, she's still acting now too. She had like a recurring role in Mad Men, so she's been working forever, and she's a good actor. I just think that you're given sort of this like play a sort of doe-eyed kid.
That you can kind of put on the director. You kind of have to set the scene like, hey, listen, this is your dad. You haven't seen him in 15 years. You don't have to be overwhelmed in joy, but maybe even if you're playing whatever they want of her didn't happen. Like whether it should have been shock or confusion or anger, like there's nothing there. She's like, it was too like, huh, well, look at that. There's my dad.
I will say this though, for this scene, the way she acts of everything we're saying, when she's like, you're not my father, he's my father. Then I was like, not only is that gutting, but that seemed like that acting was, I think, really well done.
I didn't see a problem with her acting like at all, actually.
You don't think that moment was a big moment in her life, as her dad she hasn't seen since before she can remember anything. So she doesn't know him, period, like at all, because you don't remember things from when you're 2. All of a sudden he shows up and she just like, oh, you're my dad? Completely unsold, no soul.
I wouldn't say she was a bad actress, but I would say her reaction, that specific line, fell super flat and kind of threw me off.
Yeah, maybe that line. I think overall it was fine. Like it didn't jump out at me as like, this is terrible acting. We've seen that before for sure in plenty of shows, but I don't think this is one of those moments.
Yeah, it comes up. I guess the mother said that all she knew about him is that he lived in Montana, was thinking about running for Senate. He's like, oh, I got some bad news. I lost the Senate race. And he kind of admits, like, I think your mom was just trying to talk me up so you didn't know the reality of the story. I'm just kind of a New York cabbie. And throughout the conversation, he keeps mentioning, like, you know, how he's her father. Joe, as you mentioned, she kind of corrects him and she's like, hey, like, I don't want to be rude or anything, but, like, you're not my father. Like, the man who raised me my whole life is my father. And kind of basically accuses him of just, like, not caring so much. That's when he was, like, really quick to jump in and be like, hey, no, like, I know it's not a long time, but I raised you for 2 years. And I do remember a lot of things about you, because she feels like he's, you know, she wasn't really even on his radar at all.
And rightfully so.
I get her perspective.
But what's supposed to make him seem better makes him seem worse to me. And I said it earlier. So he remembers all this stuff. Yeah, he remembers all the stuff about her. He raised her, he loved her, and then he gave her up. It would have been better if, like, she left pregnant or if she took her as a baby. But
yeah, it's tough because there's not enough context, right?
I think there's plenty of context. He said it all.
I don't know. Judd Hirsch got me in this. He almost breaks up when he's giving this monologue, and I felt it, you know. I don't think we mentioned it also, though. There's a ticking clock on this scene, right? She's boarding in 5 minutes, so he has just this much time to connect.
He
with
makes
her.
the joke that that's 30 seconds per year or whatever. He's like, we might have to skip the 60s. And that was all real quick and like clever. Yeah. Yeah, no, I thought his dialogue here was great because he's going over all these little things and everything he remembered about her, right? So you now know that he's kind of repressing all these memories, not bringing her up for all these years, where in reality, like faced with it, like he remembers every little detail about being with her those first couple years.
This, and I will say too, like I said, he starts breaking up. He's telling about like all the things he knew about her and having just a tiny baby right now. Like I was just tugged at me a lot.
Ferg, I can see your displeasure with what we're talking about. Why?
I just disagree. I wholeheartedly disagree. He could have called all this time, and you're supposed to forgive that he fucking gave the kid up, didn't fight for her or anything, and then, oh, I'll call him when I get a free phone call, and I'm bullied into it by my coworkers. Oh, then I'll drive down. So, oh, I get a free vacation to fucking Miami.
Well, I don't think it's a vacation. I think they drove and turned and burned and drove right back home.
Yeah, that's a lot of hours. That's nearly 50 hours in a car just to have 5 minutes with her. So like, that's not.
I don't think
exactly
this is like a Griswold scenario. I don't think they were stopping at the ball of yarn or anything, you know?
But he didn't care beforehand.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that he didn't care. I think it's that he was in a situation where maybe for whatever reason, like he allowed himself to believe it, but he was told it would be best for her if you just stepped aside and we had this life together.
So this kid that he's raised for 2 years, he's like, okay, take her.
It also sounds like maybe that she just kind of left too, right? And like
that's another thing. She was moving to South America, so it's not like he was going to be in her life much. So at age 2, what are you going to do? You know what I mean? Like, are you going to call her? Like, she can't talk. Like, so you're going to have to wait a couple of years or keep traveling down to South America and finding a place to stay to visit her for a couple of days.
Or you fight it in court and say, you can't move. I have half custody.
I think you could have like split the difference here, and he could have been like, I sent you cards every birthday. I sent you cards every Christmas. And her be like, I never got those. And then the blame is on the mom.
Yeah.
And then you'd still feel like at least he was trying. I think that maybe would have made it a little easier to take on his side.
Well, I was going to say, I'll ask the two parents here, if the same situation happened, would you not go and fly to Brazil
immediately,
as often as possible?
You find that fucking dog.
Yeah.
Listen, if somebody took Martha from me, Martha's 2 now, right at this age. So if somebody
It's
took
not
her
the same.
He's not, by the way, he's not one of those people that understands that. I want you to know that, Ferg. He doesn't know that.
If someone took Martha from me, I would go and visit my Martha.
New listeners, Martha's his dog.
Yes.
New and old listeners, I would bet every cent in my bank account right now that Gordo's going to celebrate Father's Day.
I do. I do. I expect it. I have cards from the dog and the cat.
Did you use your left hand to write them so they look all wonky?
Thanks, Dad.
Do you dip the dog's paws in ink and put it at the end so it's like they signed it?
My wife does that, actually.
She dips her hand in ink.
No, she did
giant human
outline.
hand. The dog was crazy.
She did an outline of the dog's hand. It was very cute.
You might have a problem.
I don't have a problem.
We're all animal lovers here, by the way, too. This is not shitting on the dog or anything.
I don't know. Gordo is making me an animal hater.
So to reel this back in a little bit, he finishes this whole kind of dialogue, and you're getting the call over the intercom again, like they're about to start boarding, like final boardings right now. So she has to get up and go, and you know they kind of have this awkward, like, okay, well, I guess I'll see you around, and you know she starts to walk off. He's trying to give all this last minute fatherly advice, like don't trust guys and all this, and he's like, well, you know, if you want to reach out, like here's something with my address on it. She's like, this is your driver's license. He's like, well, keep it. Then you'll have a picture of me too. I guess there was a continuity issue though, that in 1978, New York did not have pictures on their licenses yet.
How easy must it have been to get a fake ID when there's no photos on licenses? We would have been living the dream as teenagers pre that.
All right, sure thing, Mr. Papa Giorgio. Here's your 12 pack.
Yeah.
I love that they looked heavily into an airline that would be flying to Miami, Iberia, They didn't look into New York not having pictures on their license.
Yeah, because it's probably like California. They were probably already there, yeah. So you know what this throws me, because so now she's about to walk off and they kind of exchange looks, and then before she leaves, she's like, you know what? And like she runs to her father and they have a big hug. And I thought this was really well done and emotional. And I thought for sure Ferg would be in tears at this moment.
Nope.
But Ferg was so anti this relationship that I have it in my notes. Ferg, did you cry? And but the way he was talking this whole time, I was like, wow, I guess we just didn't get it from him on this one.
And then she has the audacity to kiss him. She kisses him. That's a spit in her adopted father's face.
It was a weird kiss because they both didn't know if it should happen, and then it was awkward, but
It's like a Tom Brady kiss.
no, that's more loving. She walks off. She finally has to get on the plane and board, and he walks back to the guys, and the first one to talk to him is Bobby, and he's like, oh, your daughter, she's beautiful. He's like, oh, thanks, man. And then you like look over and Latka's just like sobbing and like walks off.
See, Latka feels the emotion of the moment. Ferg, why
That's
can't
what I
you?
thought Ferg was going to be. Yeah, I thought Ferg was going to be Latka. Ibida.
Did anybody else get the weird feeling too, though, when he was like, hey, your daughter's beautiful, Alex, that there was going to be like a weird one comment too far from Bobby?
Yeah.
That's where it was going to go, yeah.
He could have just did like a playful, like, watch it,
You think he was going to get her pregnant like Rizzo?
The rat?
Yes, the
No.
rat.
Imagine if in Grease, there's a mega mix cut of Grease where he impregnates Rizzo the rat. I would like that movie more than Grease 2. I would give it so many more stars.
They all walk off after Latka to console him from the moment. And then we get a new scene and we're back at the garage, and the guy who's there to like collect the money from the payphone is like fixing it, and he's like screwing that plate back in, and everyone's just kind of like groaning at him. Like, oh, well, it was sweet while it lasted. And then you got John walk in and announce to everyone that he got his hack license, so now he can be a New York cab driver. I still don't know what his story is because I didn't know that he was there to live. I thought he was just like on vacation, and now he's a cab driver.
Yeah.
But maybe it was like he came here to vacation and New York is one of those cities. I don't personally feel that way, but that people go to and they're like, I am in love with it. I'm staying. I never want to leave.
Sure. I thought you don't have to give us a lot of backstory. We got a little up front. All you need was like one or two lines changed that would explain his existence a little bit better to make this not seem so odd and out of place. But
I'd like to think he was fleeing someone.
Like he's like running from the mob or something. Yeah.
So he walks up to Bobby and he's asking him how things went with that like audition. And we find out that he didn't get the part. And as he's explaining it, like John keeps giving him like the look like, you all right, man? He's like, I'm fine. And just keeps going through it. And he's like trying to play tough. And eventually John just goes in and gives him a hug. And Bobby's just like, oh, thank you. Like he needed that hug so bad, but he was trying to like mask it.
That made me tear up a little.
That made you tear up?
I'm just kidding.
It was very sweet, though. It is weird, though, that he doesn't stick around. He's only in the first season.
Okay, good. I was going to say, I watched a lot of Taxi. I don't have any recollection of this character at all.
I had this conversation about it with my wife, too, where we're talking about this. What I think happened is this happens to a lot of us on the shows where we say we've seen a pilot of a show in insane amount of times. I feel like I've seen this pilot an insane amount of times, and I've seen every episode from every other season of Taxi an insane amount of times, but not the other episodes of this season that much. And I don't know what that was in syndication, because I, at the beginning, did not remember he was in the show going forward, but I've seen a million Taxis like you have.
I remembered him, but I never really watched Taxi, watched it as an adult. I watched it a lot as a kid, and that's kind of all I really have, but I did remember him. But yeah, after that hug, we just get Louis over the PA, and it just kind of ends on that whole him calling out all the assignments to everybody again. And he's just kind of calling out names and cabs, and that's what closes it out. Which I thought was a nice little closeout. It was just, nothing too complicated. We just kind of bring back everyone to the shop and kind of get a vibe that this is how a lot of these episodes are going to go. They're going to be very focused on the actual being in the garage together, and they kind of just out for the new day.
Yes, it is.
It's weird that that's like the only real wrestling non-Andy Kaufman reference we made this entire episode. We talked about heel and nobody made I was going to rip into Jericho or something. We didn't do it. You got the New Day in there.
But yeah, no, that was the conclusion of the episode. Yeah, I don't know. Taxi was just a show that we had talked about doing for so long. Thank you, Tony Danza, gave us a good reason to do it now.
I'm so glad we got to cover it because this is a great show, and I hadn't seen it in a while, and now this is definitely on the list of like other shows to keep in rotation on the binge.
Do you think Tony Danza will appreciate that we are doing an extravaganza?
I hope he does.
I don't know if we're on his radar, but if he finds out, hopefully he doesn't. Hey, you can jump on anytime you want, Tony.
I did at him on Twitter, and he didn't respond.
What a
Maybe
jerk.
people need to at him for us.
Tony, if you're listening, I want Mona's number.
By the time this episode comes out, hopefully we have like a nice graphic up announcing extravaganza and all that. We got 3 more weeks to talk about them. So until now, we might as well close this one out. So I want to get into the green light or cancels. I'll go in the order I see you in next, starting with you.
Yeah, I just I was actually really surprised to see or hear rather your hesitations potentially with this. I thought it was just, even with the subject of the episode being a little dark on Alex and his daughter, I thought it was funny most of the time. I really liked the cast. It was a pretty basic sitcom as far as sitcoms go. Kind of talked about it with I Love Lucy too, like less is more sometimes. We didn't do a lot of moving. Like it was in like the same, set for most of the time. And you really got a good appreciation of all the characters in a pretty good way. I definitely wanted to keep watching and, see what else these guys get into. So, yeah, it's a pretty easy green light. I liked it a lot.
Ferg.
So as I said before, I watched a lot of Taxi back in the day, and I love this show. I love the character of Alex. This episode ruined Alex Rieger for me. It wasn't just the daughter thing. It was his attitude when he walked in. It was him hitting on Elaine. It was just him being a creep. But luckily for the show Taxi, everybody else stepped up. And that is a fantastic cast. And Tony was great in it. Elaine was very shortly in it, but she was good. Louis De Palma is an iconic character. And Latka was what got me into the show originally. Him and his wife, Sanka, who was not in the show in this episode. It's going to get the green light from me based on everything else. It's a good show as a whole. I don't like the main plot of that, but everything else was fine. Green light.
Joe.
Yeah, I love this. I think that this is one of those like just great, well-cast ensembles. We mentioned some parallels to Cheers. I think it's very much that workplace comedy that mainly stays in one place, and you sort of fall in love with all the weird characters who work there. I think one interesting thing is a lot of times a character like Latka is something they get introduced in like the 2nd or 3rd season when things are failing, and they've got to throw in like a new wacky character to like bring up and make it a little different. This show brings it in from the beginning and makes it part of the ensemble, which not a lot of shows can pull off. I don't think anybody could have done it that wasn't Andy Kaufman either. Like, I just don't think it would have worked the same way it does. I was thinking about the very first apartment I ever had. I lived on a couch. It wasn't my apartment, really. I lived in a living room for a while. And my roommate, Simon, and I, we would wake up every morning before work. Taxi was on at like 8 a.m. We would watch 2 episodes of Taxi before my roommate, who worked 3rd shift, would come home drunk and play video games in the living room. And I had to like get up off the couch and like go to work. And I was just remembering like all these weird memories of how much I enjoyed this show. And I've seen this pilot so many times, weirdly, like I said. It's a huge green light. I'm going to probably watch it in bed tonight.
Gordo.
True to like how I started liking the show, I wasn't like super excited about watching it because I didn't want like nostalgia to sort of be ruined. Like I remember liking it as a kid. And then it just grew on me throughout the episode. Like the cast is great. And they don't even hit their full stride because Rhea Perlman is also in this too, that we failed to mention, that like she's another character that comes green light for me.
Well, we didn't really get too much into the fact that it's like a workplace comedy, like, a very early one, which is still to this day a very tried and true, like easy, successful way to do a sitcom. I thought it was done really well. I thought it was a great cast. The storyline was a little weird. To get into something like that for episode 1, kind of a weird way to throw you in. I thought it was a great introduction to a lot of characters, though. Maybe not the story I would go episode 1 with, but I'm hooked. I think this is a show that I never watch anything, but I would like to kind of front to back this one and give it a whirl. I think it would be a fun watch. So green light from me. So with that being said, as far as week 1 of the extravaganza goes, we're starting off strong with a perfect 5 out of 5. Congratulations to Taxi. You live on to see episode 2. I want to thank all of you who are listening. Again, go to S1E1pod.com. That's where you can follow all our social medias, S1E1pod on Instagram and X. Give us a follow on those. Interact, hit us up, let us know things you want to do. If you have an idea for a theme month like the extravaganza that you think would be a fun thing for us to cover, let us know. We'll entertain anything. So hit us up, but I want to thank all of you guys for listening. Catch us again next week with week 2 of the extravaganza. Who's the boss? But until then, thank you. Goodbye.
I think we got the best Joes, Jims, Marios.